Round the World Lit Audio. Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Part 2. Week 4. Chapters 4 to 6. Full narration script. Channel intro. Welcome to Around the World Lit Audio, the greatest novels ever written, from every corner of the world, in English. New chapter every week, free to listen. Chapter recap. In week 3, Raskolnikov burned with fever for days after the murder. His friend Razumikin organized his recovery. A routine summons to the police station became a terrifying ordeal. Listening to an officer discuss the murder, his hands began to tremble and he fainted. Then he walked into a restaurant, sat down across from the police clerk Zametov, and talked about the murder with the intimacy of someone who had thought of nothing else for a week. He looked at Zametov and said, lightly, with a slight smile, "What if it was me?" Then he went to find Sonya, Marmeladov's daughter, the girl who had crossed her own uncrossable line, and knocked on her door. Part 2. Chapters 4 through 6. Part 2. Chapter 4. Sonya. Sonya was not what he expected. He had constructed her in his mind during the walk to her room, constructed her from what her father had told him in the tavern, from the image of a woman who had sacrificed herself for her family, who had done an unforgivable thing and continued living. He had expected someone marked by what she did, visibly diminished, or visibly hardened, or carrying the particular quality of damage that irrevocable decisions leave on a person. She was small. She was perhaps 18. She had fair hair and blue eyes, and a face that had the quality of someone who has not yet acquired the defenses that experience usually installs: open, vulnerable, capable of being hurt by almost anything. She received him in her small room, with the nervous courtesy of someone unaccustomed to receiving visitors, particularly visitors of the educated class, young men who were not clients, who arrived with no obvious purpose. He told her he had known her father. Her face changed at this. Not with grief exactly. Her father had been dead for some days now, killed by the horse carriage, the death he had predicted in the tavern with the accuracy of a man who had been heading there for years, but with something that recognized what his death had meant, and was still working out what to do with it. Raskolnikov sat across from her, in the small room, and looked at her. He thought, she has done something as terrible as what I have done. She lives with it. She functions. She feeds her family. She does not collapse under the weight of what she is and what she does. How does she do that? He wanted to understand the mechanism, not because he wanted to become like her. He did not think he could, but because he needed to understand how a person continues after they have done the thing that cannot be undone. He asked her about her faith. This was a question that arrived from somewhere unexpected even to him. He had not planned to ask about faith, had not thought particularly about faith since before the murder, which felt like a very long time ago. But sitting in her small room with her open face across from him, it was what he wanted to know. She said, "I believe in God." She said it simply, without defensiveness, without the particular strain of someone maintaining a position under pressure. She said it the way you say something that is simply true, the way you say the sky is blue, or water is cold. He said, "And your life, what you do, that does not trouble your faith." She said, "It troubles everything. But God does not stop being God because I am troubled." He sat with this. He had expected her to be broken. She was not broken. She was damaged, visibly, in ways that showed in how she held herself and how she spoke, and the particular quality of carefulness she brought to everything, as though the world were fragile and needed to be handled gently. But she was not broken. He left her room without having said what he had come to say, which was possibly because he did not know what he had come to say. He walked home through the evening streets, and thought about her faith, which was not something he could share, and was something he could not stop thinking about. Part 2. Chapter 5. The Encounter. He met Porfiry Petrovich for the first time 3 days later. Razumikin arranged it, which was characteristic of Razumikin. He arranged things without being asked, with the cheerful efficiency of someone who assumes that what is useful should be done and does it. He had heard that there was a legal matter related to the pawnbroker's estate. Items that had been pawned were being returned to their owners as part of the investigation, and Raskolnikov had pawned items there and therefore had a legal reason to visit the investigator handling the case. The investigator was Porfiry Petrovich. He was perhaps 35, round-faced, with light eyes, that were cleverer than his manner suggested, and a way of talking that was circular and discursive and seemed to go nowhere while actually going everywhere. He received Raskolnikov and Razumikin in his office with the warmth of a man who genuinely enjoyed conversation, and found the people he talked to interesting, which was either authentic or the most effective disguise available to a detective. He talked about crime, not about the specific crime, not about the pawnbroker and her sister, not about the investigation, not about suspects or evidence. He talked about crime in the abstract, about the psychology of criminals, about what makes people do the things they do and whether they can help it, and what society's response to those people ought to be. He was, in the course of this conversation, describing Raskolnikov's theory back to him. Not precisely, not with the specific language Raskolnikov had used in the article he had written months before the murder. The article about extraordinary men and ordinary men, about the right of certain people to transgress the moral laws that govern lesser people. But the substance was there, the argument was there, and Porfiry was presenting it with the particular care of someone who has read it thoroughly and found it interesting. He said, "I read your article, the one in the journal, about crime. Very interesting theory." Raskolnikov felt something move through him, a cold recognition, the specific chill of being seen by someone you had not expected to see you. He said, "It was a theoretical piece, an intellectual exercise." Porfiry said, "Of course. But the theory itself, the idea of the extraordinary man, the man for whom ordinary moral laws don't apply, you believe that?" Raskolnikov said, "I think certain people, throughout history, have had the right to transgress. Napoleon crossed corpses. Caesar crossed corpses. They were not troubled by this." Porfiry said, "And you, would you consider yourself one of those people?" He said it lightly, with the pleasant curiosity of someone asking an interesting question at a dinner party. Raskolnikov said, "No, of course not." Porfiry smiled. He said, "Of course not. I didn't think so." He said it in a tone that meant something other than what it said, and Raskolnikov understood that, and understood that Porfiry understood that he understood it, and the conversation continued in this register, two intelligent men talking about something neither of them was naming, for another half hour. When Raskolnikov left Porfiry's office, he understood several things. He understood that Porfiry suspected him, not with evidence, without evidence, on instinct and inference and the particular reading of a mind that had encountered many criminals, and recognized something in Raskolnikov that he could not yet prove, but would not forget. He understood that Porfiry was not going to accuse him directly. He was going to circle. He was going to have conversations like this one. Conversations that were about everything except the murder, in which the murder was present in every sentence. He understood that this was going to be worse than a direct accusation. A direct accusation could be defended against. This could not be defended against. This required him to be always present, always composed, always himself, and being himself, he was beginning to understand, was no longer something he could reliably do. Part 2, Chapter 6, The Stranger in the Stairwell. He was not sleeping. Sleep had become unreliable since the murder, not impossible, but uncertain, arrived at obliquely, interrupted by things that were either dreams or something he could not name. He lay in his garret in the summer nights, and the darkness was too thin and the silence was too loud, and the weight of what was under the wallpaper, the money, the items taken from the pawnbroker's chest, the evidence that existed in his room, and that he needed to get rid of and could not bring himself to touch, pressed on him even in the dark. He got up one night and took the things from under the wallpaper. He carried them through the streets. He was not sure where he was going. He walked with the particular purposefulness of someone who has a destination they have not consciously chosen, and is following it anyway. He found himself in a courtyard, an empty courtyard, late at night, with a large stone in the corner. He hid everything under the stone. He went home. He lay on his sofa. He felt nothing. Not relief. He had expected to feel relief and did not. The things were no longer in his room, and this was operationally useful and emotionally inert. A few days later Razumikin told him there was a man asking questions about him. Not the police, not Porfiry, a private man, someone who had been making inquiries in Raskolnikov's neighborhood, asking about his habits, his history, his movements. Razumikin described him, middle-aged, well-dressed, with an air of someone who had money, and was accustomed to getting information. Raskolnikov said, "I don't know who that would be." Razumikin said, "Neither do I. But he seems to know who you are." The man appeared the next day. He arrived at Raskolnikov's door and knocked, and when Raskolnikov opened it he was there, exactly as Razumikin had described, middle-aged, well-dressed, with the easy manner of someone who has decided how the conversation is going to go before it begins. He said his name was Svidrigailov. Raskolnikov looked at him. He knew the name. It was the name of the man in his sister Dunya's letter, the employer who had pursued her, who had made her position in his household impossible, who had been stopped only by the intervention of his own wife. The man who had caused his sister so much damage. Svidrigailov looked at him with the particular expression of someone who finds the person they are looking at genuinely interesting, not in the way of an enemy, not in the way of a friend, but in the way of a person who has encountered something that confirms a theory they have been developing. He said, "I have wanted to meet you for some time. Your sister speaks very highly of you, and I have heard other things about you." "Interesting things," Raskolnikov said. "What things?" Svidrigailov smiled. He said, Perhaps we should talk. I think we have more in common than you might expect. He said it in a tone that was not threatening, and was not reassuring, and was not anything that Raskolnikov could place in a familiar category. He said it in the tone of a man who knows something, and is deciding how much of what he knows to deploy and when. Raskolnikov stood in the doorway of his garret, and looked at Svidrigailov and felt, for the first time since Porfiry, the particular cold of being known by someone he had not anticipated. He said, "Come in." Chapter Transition. You have reached the end of Part 2, Chapters 4 through 6 of Crime and Punishment, by Fyodor Dostoevsky. In the next episode, Svidrigailov reveals what he wants. Dunya and Raskolnikov's mother arrive in St. Petersburg, the reunion that Raskolnikov has been both anticipating and dreading. And Porfiry Petrovich arranges another conversation, this one more specific, more direct, closer to the question that has been building since the first meeting. The circle is tightening. The next episode is available next week. Subscribe to Around the World Lit Audio so you never miss a chapter. A new episode arrives every week.